Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. Thank you for sharing, listening, subscribing to this podcast. Today, we'll take a transformative journey into the emotional and spiritual depths of art with an artist who creates immersive sensory experiences meant to awaken and connect. Please welcome Blue Robin. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on. And it's one of those things I need to figure out where you're located because I wasn't sure. I saw Philly. I saw some stuff. I'm like, all right, where's dude at? But before we get into some of that stuff, I at least want to start off with giving you the space to introduce yourself. I think there's a lot of strength in that. Folks, like for instance, if someone introduces me for like a panel or something, they'll say, podcaster or whatever. And I'm like, I prefer audio wizard, more than podcaster. So
that works.
I want to give you that space to introduce yourself.
So my name is Blue Robin, originally from Philly. And yeah, there you go. And I focus on being a creator and being the artist of love. So everything I do is centered around love. And so depending on which medium is needed at that time will determine what I'm using. So I don't like to say I'm a painter. I don't like to say I'm a fashion designer, or I don't like to say any of those specific things because it just kind of limits the amount or how I'm able to create. And so who's telling what's it going to be in the future? But right now I'm doing a little bit of everything.
No, I think that's great. It's one of those things where if you have a lot of interest, you kind of delve into those to see what it is, but having sort of that North Star of I'm doing this out of love, and
right.
For me and what I'm doing, I sort of like seek the truth in what I'm doing in terms of the storytelling thing, or even, I do a movie review podcast outside of this, and I'm looking for those like little factoids that are kind of forgotten sometimes and going through this sort of black lens. But, I don't say that I reviewed this or I'm an archivist or whatever. I just say like I do podcasts and they kind of are about these topics and I kind of approach it in this way. So for you, what was your one of your early art experiences or experiences with creativity, whether it is in the making of it or in the appreciating of it? But what comes to mind when you think back to one of those really early experiences related to art and creativity?
Oh, so I would probably say one that kind of made me start taking it serious. I think I had to be in about second or first grade, and I went to a private school. So our school went from kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade, and they had this school-wide competition to like draw something. And I was just like, well, I've been drawing a little bit here and there, like off of comics and then off of like cartoons. But I was like, let me tackle this. And I think I did like a Saint Nicholas or something like that piece, and it was bigger than me because I was all of what 2 feet tall around that time. But I did a piece that was pretty big. And then from that, I was entered in a competition, and I was one of like 4 finalists. And it went from kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade. And I think all the other kids were like towering over me. So it was all upperclassmen. And then I was like the only like second or first grader that was in the competition. But to have my work be able to hold its own up against like 8th graders, I was like, all right, I think I might be onto something.
It's like the JV versus the varsity thing.
Right.
Yeah. The big boys. I got this. What were some of your favorite cartoons or comics growing up? Whenever someone mentions that, it definitely gets my ears up,
So I would say my favorite cartoon had to be Gargoyles.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, being, at this stage in life and having that as a reference point, there's a lot of unintentional comedy in some of those. You're like, really?
Really? Yeah.
All right. All of the barrows. Got it.
Right.
So you touched on it a little bit earlier. What are the mediums that you're working in, and what was the first one? Was the first one sort of like the drawing and sketching? What was the mediums that you're working in currently, and what was sort of that first one for you?
So I'll start with the first one and then I'll work my way up. So the first one I would say was pen.
Mm.
because I was raised by my grandmother, and so she was she worked in the school. So every day she would come home, she had scrap paper and pens and all that. And so we would break the pencils and we would do different things thrown around. So the pens were what we had a lot of. And so what I would do is take the scrap paper and I would draw with a pen. The difference is that with a pen, there's no erasers. So I just learned how to just stack on top of it. So a lot of my earlier pieces, and it's still today, like those pieces, like literally, like there's no such thing as a mistake. It's just something that adds to the story. And so I just kind of really took that in. And then now as I move into other mediums, I take that same message, that same lesson and kind of attack it that same way.
So in moving into the other mediums, what are you exploring like these days? Like I would imagine, as you touched on, is like it's not one particular thing, but let's say if there was something you were working on today, what mediums did you kind of play within today?
So right now, I actually have a fragrance line that I just released this year, called Azura, and that's literally I spent an entire year working with a perfumist out up in New York, literally crafting the scent and going through like we think it was between like 15 to 20 different formulas until we got to the one that I was like, this is it. And so to me, I took it the same way I was with the canvas. It's just like, all right, we just layer it and we're just layering it. All right, we add this to this, take this out, add that, and then until where that scent literally like opens up like a flower as you're wearing it.
Look, man, I've been trying to figure out how to get connected with perfumist, right?
Right, right.
Like I need to have that smell of podcast studio. It's like over food, maybe a little blunt smoke, who knows?
Right. And listen,
Tequila, it's a lot of different
yeah,
string
yeah.
failures, all of that stuff as a fragrance. That is the podcast smell. So, but that's really dope that you've even gone into that. I always admire folks like when I look at music, right? When someone's like a
Hmm.
multi-instrumentalist, that's got my
Right.
attention. It's like you can
Hmm.
be a virtuoso at any one particular thing, and I'm not dogging that or anything, but when someone's a multi-instrumentalist, I'm interested in how they think. So if someone is doing
Right.
multiple things and it's like you're dabbling with perfumes, you're figuring out fragrance. And this was a question that came up this past weekend. I was at a convention and I was talking with my partner about, of the senses, of the main, like, five senses we talk about, what is the one that, has the most sort of memory attached to it? And for both of us, we came to a smell.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's something about that people are playing with that just, I don't know, it just hit me when you mentioned the perfume.
And it's funny that I'm going to circle back into what you just said, because it's funny you say that because my my reasoning for tackling the perfume was that I started out with memory. So memory was the thing that I was always trying to capture. And then also when you tap into memory, you tap into the emotions and then people have that connection to it, right? And so I was trying to figure out how do I tackle and tap into all the senses.
Yeah.
And so the way I went on that journey was the same way you would go into like a martial arts journey or different things like that. Like I got to practice one skill set first and get an understanding before I stack the other. And then as I get that understanding, I fuse them together to create a whole series of movement. And so that's literally what was happening. Like I focused on the visual sense, and then I went into touch. And then after I kind of got a sense of those, I started playing with sound and different things. And so then my next one that was on the list was scent, because I know once I can trigger scent, I can really start to pull them in. And so now if you can get a scent, if you go into a gallery and you smell like the fragrance going around, but you're also seeing the art that's also playing off of that same thing, now you're creating an experience.
Yeah. It's sort of the whole thing when I go to a place, and I'm a person that enjoys a good scent. I got the Lilabo stuff. I got a few different things.
Ah.
And I have like a really expansive sort of like, you have like your dressers or what have you. You probably have like one
Yeah.
of these expansive closets that just doesn't have
Right.
walls. But I go in there and I'm like, yeah, all right, I got that bond number 9. I'm gonna pull that out. I try to do it seasonally, right? I'm like, nah,
Right.
I
Right.
can't wear the same smell every day, player. I'm doing that, doing that. So yeah, smells are important, and I think you're right. The experience thing is just a big piece of it. I think, and again, going back to one of the things you touched on, I admire when folks are like, not really setting any boundaries. I'm kind of doing
Right.
what I do. So like for me, I want to get into doing sort of creative consulting. I want to say, well,
Mm,
I think this is a good idea for a sandwich. I think this should be the music that's there. I don't want to be a restaurateur, but I
right.
have ideas and thoughts in how something works. I have taste. And I think
Hmm.
that's what I'm hearing when it comes to sort of the creative pursuit and creative passion and the sort of pursuing things out of love.
Right. Right. That's exactly what it is. Exactly.
Speaking of love, I've seen, what is it? The description of a victim and a villain of love. Tell me more about that. Is that accurate? Did I read that right?
I mean, if you truly want to experience life, you have to experience all sides, right? And so it's sometimes when those things where you see people or thing, they kind of tell the story where they're always been the good guy. And if you're always the good guy, you haven't really seen what it's like on the other side. And you're also missing out on the story because you being the good guy can sometimes cause you to be the bad guy in someone else's story. And so taking and acknowledging that aspect of it allows you to really be able to see the full picture of what it is. And sometimes I think we always think of like the butterflies and the mushy stuff that comes with love, but sometimes it gets a little rough, it gets a little grungy and whatnot. And I think those elements are just as beautiful as the soft and the sweet elements. And so drawing more light on that, then it gives people a more of a clearer picture. And so that then they're not having these wild and crazy dreams of what it is. They actually can see and experience what it is.
Yeah, I think it gives you reference to like,
Right.
people talk about the sour and the sweet. You don't know one from
Hmm.
the other without having the other. And
Right.
even when you do things out of love and love is a component of it, like I love doing podcasts. I've been doing them for a very long time. And I've joked many a times, it's not inaccurate that it's the most stable relationship I've been in. Um, and in it, you may do things, and I approach things as sort of a good guy. I'm doing this project of doing these interviews. It's not about me. It's
Hmm.
about the guests that are coming on. It's like really, if you sit back and think about it, it's not. I have this logo in the background. It's not a picture
Right.
in most instances. So it's trying to amplify and help share the stories of folks. And a lot of times, I find that this is folks' first podcast. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I feel like a sort of duty and a responsibility there. And then on the other side of it, I could be doing other things. I could be doing just a podcast that's really much about me or about something that I'm pursuing that's very selfish and very loving towards me, but not necessarily loving towards the community in which I want to serve. But I really, really love it. And then on the other side of it, there's this sort of if you're quote unquote a boss, or if you're sort of running things, you can't always be like the nice loving caring person.
Right.
Sometimes
Right.
you love that thing that can't defend itself, that creative thing
Hmm.
can't defend itself, so you have to be the sort of the jerk, sort of the stone wall, and it doesn't always come out as a loving and embracive sort of thing.
Right. And those are the moments where people can take those things personal when it's not about it being a personal attack. It's about that the overall vision or mission is so much stronger that if people are getting too close or getting too personal about it, then it may feel like an attack, but it's just really just a defense of continuing the great thing that's being built.
How do you distinguish that when it comes to like collaboration? One of the things I went to this past weekend, there was a panel about collaboration
Hmm.
between different types of creatives. This was a panel with artists and writers, and sometimes the
Hmm.
visions aren't the same. It's like, okay, you're writing a little too much, bro. Can we focus on the art? Can we make sure that
Right,
tight?
right.
So when in those instances where you're collaborating, or in those instances where you're seeking knowledge, as you touched on with the perfumist, the
Mhm.
fragrance artist, how how do those instances work where you're pursuing what you're pursuing with the love and the intention around it, where they're not kind of like clicking, the collaboration isn't clicking in a way? How do you distinguish those things?
So I think of it like a jazz band, right? Like I might play the saxophone, but I need the drummer to still bring that soul and that funk with them. And I may have one way I'm taking this song, and they may have another way. But what we have to do is that when we're on that stage and we're playing together, we got to figure out what is the sound of us together, not what is the sound of us as individuals. And so a lot of time is spent on trying to find that middle ground or that sweet spot where both of us actually dwell and really amplifying that. And then from time to time, you give pockets that you can kind of show what you really are bringing to the table, and they can show what they bring into the table. It's the same thing. Like if you're playing and you're jamming, then now there's a drum solo, and the drummist is like he's literally going in, and then now there's a horn solo, and then now I'm able to like really stretch my fingers. But I think keeping those spaces for in those collaborations for people to actually really be able to kind of shine as an individual will allow them to be more open and more willing to really pour into the collaborative part.
That's great. Yeah, I would imagine you're a big jazz guy.
Yeah.
I kind of
I
got
just
that
love, I love music. I love sound. I love all of that. Yeah.
because it made me think like I dabble at the times, and I did this month of jazz interviews back in April
Mhm.
for Jazz Appreciation Month, and used to having these conversations. It was like it gave me flashbacks. I was like, "Yo, this whole month," and I was like, "Oh, did you just use like improvisation to talk about the art collaboration work?" But one of the things I've been
But
listening to very recently is like musicians that are like really really like virtuoso guitarists, and they're doing like this neoclassical genre. It's kind of like
mm,
speed metal, really intricate finger work, but it's one that comes to mind that he did a with his guitar juxtaposed to like the Japan Philharmonic, and I'm like,
mm,
those two things shouldn't go. Then it works. Then it just
mm,
works. He's still able to do his long extended solos and then kind of meld back into sort of the classical music environment and then come back out with a solo back in. And I'm like,
mm,
that it's something to be said about sort of the collaborative nature, or even something like this, where,
mm,
as I said before we got started, I was like, this is very much improvisational. This is collaborative. So let's say you come in, let's say with the wrong energy, or I come in with the wrong energy.
right.
Conversation's flat, right? Or,
Right.
but it's just like, all right, I'm going to say my thing, and then it's like, all right, Blue, cook, like go, bro.
Right. Exactly. Listen.
So talking about a little bit on, sort of weaving these different elements of emotion, of the sensory components, because that's really big. How do you determine, or how do you think through that? Like, you know, when I'm doing when I'm planning out a season, right, or some interviews,
Mhm.
I have like some questions, I have maybe some ideas of who I want to talk to in a given time, and then I kind of go from there and build off of that. If you're working on like a new series of work, how are you approaching it? Like, all right, I know I definitely want to have something visual here, but I want to have something auditory here, or something that hits the smell senses, something even from the taste perspective. How do you think through that for, let's say, a given arc of work? And actually, even in that, how often are you working? Like, what does that look like? Is it I'm completing a piece and it's going to have these elements in it from a sensory standpoint? Or is it I'm going to work for a few months, I'm going to see what I got? Tell me about that.
So I'm very like goal oriented. So I'll create projects to really challenge myself. So each project and each thing I work on is usually just a challenge to push myself to learn more about myself, and then to learn more about how I connect to the environment in which I'm in. And so that's really what I'm doing. So I'll put stuff out there where I'm like, all right, well, one year I did 60 pieces, massive pieces in a year. So maybe this year I'm pushing it to do 80. And then now I'm like, all right, so what would 80 pieces look like? And what would be the story? Like to me, storytelling is the most important part when it comes to that and in my practice, because I want to take you on a journey. I want to take you through something. And so I'm thinking of what is it, the story? What is what's the narrative? And then from there, what is needed to convey that part of the narrative. And it's like when you're watching movies and then like you have like when the movie starts or when something crazy is going, you hear that music in the background, like, all right, something's about to happen. And it's like that's the same thing like in this story, like, something's about to happen at this point. So maybe I need to add in some type of textile, or maybe I need to add in some type of sound because that's going to help get people to know that we're changing the scene or that the scene is about to get deeper. And then I kind of go with that and build it out. So I try not to go in so fixed in terms of what it's going to look like. I'm more so going to where we're trying to go. And then from there, wherever the road takes me, that's where it takes me.
How do you balance that time? You mentioned 60 large scale pieces or have you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as a person that is an overworker, this is the part-time gig. I have the real day job and
Right.
doing other things as well. Like, this is probably episode 150 something of this year. I did 300 plus last year. Wild
Right.
stuff, but it's not sort of the labor intensive nature that a lot of folks work can be. Like, I did an
Mm-hmm.
interview recently with someone who works with materials. They're craft based, and it's like, look, I got to hit the gym, or I'm not going to be able to lift my things for
Mm-hmm.
my art
Mm-hmm.
practice. So how do you balance that time and between working in various disciplines and putting out like pretty strong output? That's like one per week.
Yeah. So sometimes they come in spurts. So I might get like maybe 6 or 7 in one week, and then it allows that time for me to like kind of take it slower and stuff like that. I think the way I balance it. So the person who told you about working out, that's something that's extremely important to me because it helps me settle and balance like my mind and my energy. And then once I'm able to do that, I can kind of see ahead of me and I can see like the field, and then I just kind of fixate on it. Like once I've said it out there and I speak it out, then I just do everything in my power to get it done. And so um, sometimes that means it's unbalanced, and then sometimes I'm able to find that sweet spot. But uh, just like in school, like we used to cram for tests. I get to that cram session, but I usually just try to be as observant of I guess, my energy and observant of what the universe is pouring into me. And when the window is open, I try to get as much of it out as possible. And I just let it flow. I'll try to isolate myself in terms of location and sometimes in terms of things that I'm actually dealing with, just so that I can let everything flow until it cuts off.
Mm. Yeah. It's like the faucet will have you turn the little knob.
Yep, yep, yep. And I think that what one of the things that helped me get to that point was I think I was in one exhibition and an artist had asked me, so how do you do like how many pieces do you do at a time? I was like, I usually just do one and then I move to the next one. And they were like, well, you kind of handcuffing yourself if you do that because your mind doesn't work like that. And you're constantly thinking of different things. So why don't you try doing a couple at a time and see what happens? And then once I did that, I was able to knock out like 7 or 8 pieces in one sitting because I'm able to take breaks. And then while I'm taking break from one, I have the energy for the next one. And so then I can literally go, and I've done this before where I go like almost a full 24 hours nonstop, just like in a trance, just creating.
That's it's something that I think that Austin Kleon talks about in his book, like
Mhm.
Still Like an Artist. And one of the things that I've used in his podcast before, sort of he talks about the analog to digital loop. And
Mhm.
he said he has 2 desks in his office. One is for like things that you touch, and one's for things that are digital. And
Mhm.
he's like, if I get too bored, like web designing or what have you, I'm going over there to play with cutting paper,
Yep.
and pencils, things like that. And yeah, it is sort of this reset. And when I was at my sort of most sweet spot of it, I would do this. I'd be able to knock out like sometimes 6 interviews in a day,
Mhm.
sometimes 18 in a week. And I would still try to look for that opportunity to do that movie podcast. Now, granted, it's
Mhm.
still a podcast, but it requires different things of me. And
Right.
it's less like kind of being on. You're being on, but on in a different way. Like,
Mhm.
I'm running bits, when I'm talking about a movie, it's like, yo, what you think about that scene? That kind of whack, ain't it? You want to be mindful and respectful and not sort of waste anyone's time if you're interviewing them about their work, because
Right.
you are this types of sensitive folk. I don't know. So
I would say passionate. I changed the word to passion. Be
that's
passionate,
that's
folks.
fine. I'm still going to say something. It's all of it. It's all of it.
Right, right, right.
And so tell me a bit about like some of those moments. Like I read that art is a tool for healing.
Mhm.
So is there an experience that comes to mind that kind of led you on this path of sort of, approaching things out of love, having emotion in it, hitting multiple sensory elements. Like, tell me about how, that was their experience that led you to, this sort of path and how you apply yourself to your work.
So I guess for a while I kind of was just creating to create, and then I had again came out of school and I was doing design work, and I kind of was pitting like the actual art, like the painting and all more of that creative part of it to the side, because I'm like, oh well, this is going to guarantee me this and guarantee me that. And then what was happening was I just felt empty. Like I was doing great design, but I felt like something was missing. And what was missing was the love. And the love comes when I'm creating art. And so when I realized that and I tapped back into me, and then I started to pour that into my designs and then also pull it out of my art and my paintings, everything just became electric. And I was able to like tap into realms and touch people that I wasn't able to in the past. Because I had taken that out and thinking everything had to be more mathematical, and missing the fact of like what made what I was doing unique and special.
You don't want to lose your specialness. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You gotta have that. Like when I do these interviews, obviously I'm not the best interview in the world. This is not the best podcast in the world. I challenge that. But
Right.
I gotta ask myself a little bit. But
Listen.
it is one of those things of like, what makes my thing sort of unique. And I think that's a lesson for a lot of artists, a lot of people who are doing anything. But I think specifically with artists, I've encountered folks and I've had conversations with folks who, their sort of craft that they really love, it's not popping at that moment for whatever reason. And then it's just like, I'm going to give up on this and move and try to do something that almost feels like a pastiche of somebody else's thing. It's like you just gave away your specialness.
Yep.
How are you going to put your own stamp on it? Or it's sort of like I'm abandoning, the thing. You're abandoning the thing that brought you to the dance, and the thing that to some degree or another, and you're gonna like this, the thing that you loved.
That part. And that's the thing I like. I try to stress that so much when I'm talking to my peers and talking to the next generation as like they're coming up. It's like, look, I don't care if you just did stick figures. If you own that stick figure and it's you, it's good. It's amazing. But if you're only doing stick figures because you saw another artist do it and you think that that's the way you're supposed to do art, you miss the whole point.
Yeah.
And it's so flat then it's like, all right, now let me tell me about it. And you can't really tell me about it because all you're going to tell me is about another artist's story. You can't tell me how it connects to yours, or you can't really tell me how you got to that conclusion because it's so much based off of what you've seen from someone else. But then it's also a reflection of you not actually tapping in to understand who you are.
I remember. Yes. And I remember in college, right? I went to the illustrious Morgan State University here in Baltimore. We had like, you'd had those classes that is like, this is a science class for like business majors. So it's
Right.
like, it's capped in a certain way. And it's like, maybe there should be like social media for artists, because it's sort of this
Definitely.
thing where you see something, you have multiple things going. You have this sort of necessity that you got to create. It's for the engine. It's not for the exposure. It's for the engine of social media. And then it's the sort of, as the passionate or the sensitive, as it were, you're on there, you're seeing other people that are getting these shots and you're not getting them, but you feel like your work might be better than theirs subjectively, obviously. Or even
Right.
something like what I do, doing a podcast thing, which I think is somewhere in that sort of intersection between arts and journalism, at least how I approach it.
Right.
Back in what was it, 2020, 2021, every podcaster tried to do some version of an entanglement podcast. And I was like, you're not doing anything fresh. And it didn't have any confidence and knowledge because I've been doing it so long. It's like, I could do that and I could do it really well, but that doesn't speak to me. And I think being able to recognize that is important, but I think it takes a certain like a level of experience, I suppose, where you've been doing it, you just don't get too high, you don't get too low. Just recognize like, why are you doing it? Where's the why? What is your why? Protecting that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. Like, I think even just before you even pick up the mic or you pick up the brush, understand why you picking up the mic and why you picking up the brush, just like you said, before you even start with it. And if you check back in on a continuous basis on that why, I think it'll keep you. That should be your anchor. The why is your anchor. The why is your total.
Yeah. I got two more real questions, and then I got some rapid fire questions for you. So I want to end on a positive. So I'm going to hit you with the more the challenging question. What are some of those challenges that you encounter when you're working and designing like work to be consumed and interpreted in multiple ways? I know that just regular art, I don't know what that even means, but I've had conversations with people. I don't get art, and I'm like, okay, that's a lot. That's a weird way to question it.
Right.
What are some of the challenges that you face or you've faced in your unique art experience?
So I would say one of the strengths I have is the fact of understanding design. Design is purpose of design is to solve a problem. And so with that, I'm always going into like, I'm keeping that in the back of my mind. And then art, I'm expressing of self. So as I express myself, I see how can the expression of self solve a problem. And so then I look for where the problem of what, or I guess the solution that I come up with, where that solution can fit to help. And then that's where I kind of, instead of trying to force it onto certain people, I try to find the people who naturally will gravitate towards it.
Okay, I like it. This is the last one I got for you.
Okay.
Can you discuss a particular project or particular piece that you felt successfully like embodied? Like if you were to use your work as an elevator pitch, that's the way I frame this. What would be that piece that you're like, here's my work. What's the piece?
So it really just depended on the year in which you would have asked that question.
Let's say this year. Let's say this year.
Let's say this year. All right. So this is Roz Rising, and this piece is an evolution of one of my older pieces, which I'm not sure if you can see in the back.
I can.
That one that's back there. Yeah. So that was the piece that it originally started with, which actually was originally at the Why Not lot.
Yeah.
Up in Baltimore, like off of Charles, yeah. and that was a mural piece, and as I did that piece, it was supposed to be paying homage to the Piscataway natives, and so it's a native child with the headdress, and then as the rivers are like coming down and meeting, and so it has a lot of texture and different things and different elements in it. So I took that piece and then I remixed it. So I took the elements from the painting and then put it onto a digital format and then created something that allowed that piece to become a sun. And it's also the sun card in the tarot deck, and that's the one. And so I pulled out elements of that. And so because I'm working on that right now, it's taking a bit of my past and fusing it in with my present. And so I would say that would be a definition of, I guess, the piece that would represent me now. Because it's me fusing my past into my present.
See, I don't even know how to even end on that. That is great explanation right there. Come on, you should be able to start that.
Listen. It's the questions. The questions are doing all the work.
So that's really sort of the best spot to sort of wrap there. I think that was great. I'm just captivated over here. So I want to hit you with some rapid fire questions. And as I tell everyone, don't overthink these. Don't overthink these.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to scrap the first one. I'm going to come up with a different one because I feel like the answer you gave for that last question kind of answers this one. But all right. All right. So you're going back to the fragrance, right?
Right.
What if for, and I'm sure it's going to be, the metaphysics of scent, but what is the smell that comes to mind when you think of that fragrance? Like the one that would, I guess, so relatable that people were kind of like, oh, okay, it's vanilla or what have you.
Oh, so you're talking about a note, or you're talking about me to give you like a nice, cool, like what I think when I smell it?
You know what? Actually, give me both. That's good. That actually has replaced two of my questions. That's good.
Okay. It's strangely familiar. Like when you smell it, I feel like it's something like, I think I know this. So it's like, it's strangely familiar, but it's different enough that you're not sure. And that pause is the window in which I can walk in.
So it's vanilla then.
Yeah. I mean, you understand.
Yeah, the smell takes me back to,
right.
baking with my mom in the early 80s when we didn't have a lot of brown sugar, but we had love in the household. Yeah. That's
Exactly. See,
that's
you get
that's
it.
what
You
bar
get it.
number 9 is for me. No.
Yeah, exactly. See.
All right, that's good. That's good. Let's see. If you could collaborate with any artist, living or otherwise, right? Who would it be?
Prince.
See, that's a great answer. See, yeah, I got to figure it out. I don't think you're an Aquarius, but I think you're one of those air signs. You might be in the lane. You might be in the zone. I don't know. This is the last one I got for you. And I had to get back to asking people this because I find that us artist types, us creative types, a lot of times we're so in it that we forget some of the sort of factory setting maintenance things to do. So I must ask, what did you eat today?
That's a dope question. That's a dope question. So I had some cinnamon coated pecans, a smoothie,
Yeah.
and I think that was it so far.
Okay. Okay. What kind of smoothie was it? Because I'm going to judge. I'm a smoothie guy, so I'm going to judge a little bit here.
It was a berry smoothie with coconut.
Okay. Okay. That's a winner right there. I've definitely dove in on a coconut. It's just mostly protein shakes, and I try to throw a smoothie in every now and again. Just spamming vegetables and fruit. But yeah, that's literally what it is. So that's pretty much it for this conversation, this interview. So one, I want to thank you for coming on and spending some time with me and sharing. And two, I'm going to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners where they can check you out, social media, website. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I know we've been kind of doing this back and forth for a while, but it's finally happened. I guess it just wasn't the right time, but today it is. And if you're looking to find me, you can reach me at bluerobincmb.com. And that's the same Blue Robin CMB on all social media platforms as well.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Blue Robin for being a part of this episode of The Truth in His Art. And for Blue Robin, I'm Rob Lee, saying there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You just got to look for it.